Just like to thank Touchdown Digital, the sponsor of this week's video. Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Sniper Photography. My name's Glenn Samuel and thank you for joining me here today. Today I want to talk to you about a subject which a lot of photographers don't really think about when they're comprising their images. And I think it's rather important that they do this and know why they're doing it. And it's basically, well, what we call is balance, using balance or creating balance in your imagery or your landscape photography photos. Now, when you look at a scene, it's three-dimensional, but the camera records it in two-dimensional. So how, as a photographer, do you create a balance within the frame? This is a very challenging sort of thing to try and do because not all landscapes lends itself to creating balance or enabling you to create balance in your photographs. Now, I'll be showing you a few photographs or a few images throughout this video. And now the reason why you need to create balance is to, as I said, you've got to create a 2D image into a 3D image, and it is a challenge. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm an advocate for using foreground element, and that's the beginning of the balance principle, by using the foreground and then creating midground, background. And that way you're creating balance in the image. And it's also, you've got to think about how the viewer, the person looking at your photographs, at your images, you don't want their eye racing around the screen trying to find something to fixate on, because us humans tend to look at the main subject or the main object. But if you haven't got that in your photographs, well then they're pretty flat and they still remain in a 2D formation. So I'll show you this first one. This one was taken on a very cold day in Alaska. A place called Seward, and as you can see here, I've got this this driftwood, or it looked like something out of a forest, and I've started right at the base. If you look at the base of the image, and it goes right along the piece of timber up to where it spreads out. Then you've got the canal behind it, and then the ocean and the mountains. So that is a fully balanced image. Now, that was a bit of timing there. I was in a motorhome and we pulled up and the tide was out. Now in Alaska, the tides go out for miles, and as you can see in that image. But if you have a look at it closely, you can see how there's balance there. When you look at it, your eye starts at the bottom and goes right through the middle of the frame. That's called balance. Here's another one. This one I've created where I've kept the driftwood to our right as you're looking at it. Then you'll see where the seaweed and bits of rock and thing goes to our left, looking at the image, then the canal, then the ocean, and then the mountains. So this is what I mean by creating balance. So when someone looks at that photograph, they know exactly where to cast their eye to looking at it. Here's another one here. I deliberately placed this one right in the center of the frame. Now, in some instances, creating balance, the rule of thirds sometimes does not become, it's not applicable, because the rule of thirds really isn't a rule. It's just a guide. And by placing it in the middle, I was able to break the photograph into three sections. The bit on the left with the sand, the driftwood, and on the right-hand side, the sand. But I've also created depth. And if you have a look at the tip of the timber on your right, I've kept the camera at a certain height. More about the camera height in a moment when you're doing this, because I didn't want the timber to go up near the mountains in the background. So you've got to think before you take the shot. I've always said that you must slow down in the process of landscape photography. Just slow down and take it all in and have a good look around, because the best camera you have is your eyes. That's the best camera you'll ever have, seriously. So this is how you create balance, by looking at the scene, picking something out that's in the foreground, and building on that. Make sure you've got something in the background and something in the midground and background. Wide angle lenses tend to help to a degree when it comes to creating balance, because as you know, when you shoot with a wide angle lens, everything in front of you is huge, but everything in the back, midground and background becomes smaller. Those last three images I took at 50 millimeters, and I find anywhere between 24 and 50 millimeters is excellent with if you're shooting a wide angle lens, or you've got a zoom lens that incorporates those focal lengths between 24 and 50. You can create really nice balance with the right subject, with the right components in that subject. So it's all about thinking. This next one was taken in Canada, in Whistler. And where I was staying, there was this beautiful, small, little rocky waterfall, and it was cold as when I took this shot. I actually had to get in the water to do it. Now, if you have a look at it, there's layers there, so it's creating layers, but it's balanced because you've got the water as the foreground, the rocks, and then further up where the pond is or where the pool is, and then you've got the waterfall at the background. But if you have a look at this image with the waterfall here, if you look to the left, you will see that the rocks just off center are very, very shiny. So what that does, that breaks up the image. So, and keeping in mind, not much editing has happened here. I don't edit my images to the 10th of the degree. I believe in capturing what I see and doing slight tweaks. But as you can see, this one, once again, it's created a balance. This one here is a waterfall. This is in Sydney, in suburbia. You wouldn't believe where this is actually. As you can see here, we've got the reeds, plants, bit of water, and then the waterfall itself. But on top of that, you've got the bush or the forest part up the top. Once again, it's balanced. The image is balanced. You know, you've seen these images where you don't know where your eye is going to be, where to put your eye, where to look at, what am I looking at here? It becomes very confusing and people will just skip by your images, and we don't want that. We want people to feel what you feel when you took the image. So creating balance it's not all that hard, but as I said, sometimes Mother Nature in the landscape does not give us the opportunity, or doesn't give us the opportunity to create balance. It's up to you, the photographer, to find where there are certain elements within the image that you want to capture, that there is foreground element. And this is why I'm always saying, this always leads back to foreground interest. If you've got good foreground interest, you can create an image that's fairly well balanced, but it gives meaning to the image. Okay, so you've got to think about the people that are going to look at your photographs, whether they're photographers or whether they like photography or not. At the end of the day, you're taking the photograph for yourself. So why not make it the best effort you've got, or put the best effort in to create a balanced image? This one here is in my hometown, the Blue Mountains. As you can see, the camera height here was very, very important. This was taken at 50 millimeters, and you can see the rocks in the foreground. Then to your left, Narrowneck runs to the left like this. Magnificent location, this. Runs to the left. This was very late in the afternoon. The sunsets here are pretty good if you can get the right position of the sun, and I'm going to do a video about that at another time, about the position of the sun. But as you can see with this one, it's balanced. You've got the big foreground, and then it leads off to the left to the right. So it goes in an arc like that. We've got all the forest and all the bushland on the right-hand side. So it's a balanced image. You don't want your image to be like this, or nothing in the middle. I believe when people say, oh, don't put things in the middle, well, that really only works with portrait photography, which I do a lot of for commercial stuff, and you don't put your subject in the middle. But with landscapes, it's a bit difficult not to put things in the middle. As I said, you want foreground element. You're trying to create balance by incorporating other things behind the foreground. So that's, here's another one here. I'll finish off with this one. This one was taken at Lincoln's Rock, which is a great location, except on weekends because it gets flooded with what I call Instagrammers, and you just can't move there. But during the week, this was taken at 24 millimeters, and which 24 millimeters is regarded as wide. But as you can see, I've got this rock formation in the middle, or just off the center, and it's running to our left as we're looking at the image. I've got the mountains in the background and the sky. Now, camera placement here was very, very critical, because if I had the camera down lower, the rock formation in the foreground would encompass 3/4 of the image, and that's another thing you've got to watch out for. You don't want the camera too low, and you don't want it too high. So there's a bit of calculation you have to use to create a balanced image. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Go out and try it. Go out and have a look. You can do it in your local area. You can even do it with street photography, landscape photography. You can also do it with macro photography, would you believe? Creating balance in the image by using the elements that are in front of you. So it is a bit of a challenge, but if you can master that part of your photography, well, you're well on your way to becoming a very, very good photographer, because there's thousands and thousands of images out there that really, there's no balance to them. People are just snapping away. But for us landscape photographers, and I always say this, and this is what I teach, is you must take your time. Look at the scene in front of you, or look at what's around you, and pick certain elements to put into the balanced image at the end. The image has to be balanced at the end. But to do that, you have to get it right at the beginning, of course. You have to find that foreground, see what's in the back, midground, and then the background. The challenge really with this, before I finish here, is using the foreground and the middle ground, or the midground. This is where camera placement comes right into this. You have to be very careful how low or how high you have the camera. There's some instances where you've got to really sit on the ground to do this, and I've done that in the past, only because of the elements in front of me. The elements will dictate what camera height you need to be at. So don't think you need to raise your tripod up to 5.5, 6 feet, or 1.5 meters, whatever case may be. You might have to lower it. You might have to spread those legs right out and have the camera, just off the ground. But the scene will dictate your camera positioning and angle, because sometimes you might have to shoot in portrait mode, and that's a bit of a challenge as well. So it's just a case of going out with your camera, looking at the landscape, doesn't matter where you are, and pre-visualize how you want the scene to look. Look for the elements, foreground, midground, background. If you get that right, you've got a well-balanced, finely tuned image. But it is, in the end, a fairly easy thing to come to terms with once you understand what you're looking for. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I hope you enjoy that. Please put your comments down below. I will always get back to you, and I appreciate the comments that come through to this channel. So that's it for another episode of Sniper Photography. And as I always say, be nice to yourself, family and friends, but most of all, you keep shooting, keep smiling. Bye for now.